Welcome to 2 Inches Off the Ground. When you are enlightened, you live your life 2 inches off the ground. For this episode, I want to give an activation warning. We will be talking about the death of a woman and a child. Feel free to watch this episode on my Free Spirit podcast YouTube channel. The link will be in the show notes, but please note the audio on YouTube is not edited, so you will hear some ums and filler words. You know him from our popular episode on forensic astrology. He's back. John Bazley is a forensic astrologer and psychic medium who focuses on psychic detection. He has worked with international mediums and psychic detectives such as Tony Stockwell and Scott Russell Hill on famous cases such as the Beaumont children, Kevin Hicks, and Reese Collins. In addition to working with law enforcement agencies and detectives, he has played a large part in either having a case reopened or providing avenues of inquiry that led to solving the crime. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and it's good to be back.
Good, great. We are happy to have you back. Today, we are discussing the infamous Scott Peterson case, which is so hot right now, John, right? We're recording October, November 2024. And today mostly John, is providing a new theory of what really happened. So if you're the Innocence Project or you're someone connected, listen up because we have our theory. John, I'm going to read a quick summary of the case and then I'm going to hand it to you, okay?
Sure. Sounds good.
The Los Angeles Innocence Project is at a standstill in its fight for Scott Peterson's freedom nearly 20 years after he was convicted of murdering his pregnant wife and unborn son. Peterson, now 51, was convicted in 2004 of murdering Laci Peterson and their baby just before Christmas 2002. Despite his claims of being on a fishing trip at the time of their deaths. He was initially sentenced to death, but the sentence was overturned due to problems with the original trial. Peterson was resentenced to life without parole in 2021. In May 2024, the Los Angeles Innocence Project took on Peterson's case, claiming he was found guilty due to circumstantial evidence and arguing that DNA evidence went ignored. The organization is submitting 1,000 pages of court documents to call for a new trial. Wow. And John, you and I have to say also that the Innocence Project will not take on a case unless they think they can win.
100%. I mean, they have a rate of overturning these convictions that are nearly 100%, right? And I think that they personally have something up their sleeve that was brought to light by that overturning of the death sentence. That's my own feeling of it. I think they saw that there's something wrong in the case. That got them off death row. What else is wrong with the court proceedings or, paperwork or something like that? I think they know and they're going to run with that.
Absolutely. Now, John, what are you seeing in the chart? And we have to talk about this unusual chart, this unique chart you did. So let's start talking about this new theory. So go ahead.
Okay, so we're going to be using forensic astrology, and just to give people a background of it. So what I did was I came up with what we call an event chart, and people are familiar with astrology birth charts, but not so much with the event chart. The event chart, you have a location, just like in a birth chart. You have a date, and in this case, the date will be in 2002, December 24th, and then you have a timestamp. And the timestamp would consist of a 911 call, when an Amber Alert went out, police or missing persons reports, cell phone call, text call, Also, you would have security camera footage, which has the time and date stamps on there. So you need something that's accurate, or else the chart isn't accurate. So I noticed in a lot of charts that were done post case by astrologers, they were picking out 8:30 in the morning and so on like that, and that's the time that Laci's mother was asking Scott Peterson, what happened after 8:30? What happened after 8:30? Well, these 8:30 and 9:30 time frames that I've heard of, they're not accurate. So I went with when were the police called and the report issued. It was later on, I believe it was December 25th and 5:47 p.m.
Okay, so let's stop for a second just so everyone understands. Laci Peterson went missing on December 24th, 2002. And then what you're talking about with the event chart is happening on the next day, December 25th, Christmas 2002. Is that correct?
Right. So what I did was I brought up that chart, and just to go back on the accuracy of that and how important that is, there was a woman called Lewis Rodden, and she came up with a system for accuracy. Double A was the birth certificate. A was kind of more like from a family member or something like that. B was from a biography. C was use caution, and then D was dirty data. And I'm in IT, so when you have that dirty data, it's dirty in, dirty out. And if you have dirty data going into the chart's not going to be good, and the information coming out of it is not going to be good.
That's
So
really interesting. I just have
yeah,
to say that. That's a really interesting way to look at it because I never thought of it that way. Dirty data. Okay, cool.
exactly. So why don't we bring up the chart, and I could take us of a little tour around there of what I've seen, and then we can talk about this new theory, which is really an old theory that's been around.
Okay, cool. And you guys, this will just take a second to share the screen. So just be patient and wait a few seconds. And in your mind, you can think about waiting music.
Here we go.
Here we go. Look at that beautiful chart.
Unfortunately, I have to put on my glasses to see.
Aw, you still look good.
Thank you. So why don't we start at the top? This is dark moon Lilith up here, and this is for Scott Peterson. This is secret desires. So already we're seeing something with his relationship with Amber Fry, and it also is hidden motives in the case, but actions coming out in dramatic ways. They're coming to light. The 10th house, which is right here, that's the public and the public perception. So we saw with Amber Fry that she came out of nowhere. And then that's when the family said, oh, we don't believe Scott Peterson. So now we move along down below. Eighth house. Eighth house is sex, money, drugs. It's other people's money, inheritances, and so on like that. But we have Uranus in here, and Uranus is that sudden and unpredictable events, which this case is loaded with. It's a shocking event with a death because it's in the eighth house. So that was Laci Peterson and her death, and to a certain extent, dismemberment and the death of her child, Connor. With it being in Aquarius, it also gives us a certain level of detachment, and that we saw with Scott Peterson, and also the bizarre and circumstances around the death. Next, we have Neptune in the eighth house, and that it's usually like illusions and things like that. And it's an illusion around the death and the circumstances and secrets involved with that, and speculation, misinformation, and so on surrounding the case. We move lower in here. This is Mercury in the seventh house. Seventh house is partnerships, and it's your open enemies. And that's usually the person who would be the assailant, the perpetrator, or so on like that. In this particular case, it's meticulous planning because Mercury has to do with the mind. But we're going to get back to this on here. Now we have Chiron. Chiron in the sixth house. So that is a wound. Chiron is the wounded healer. So this is significant harm coming through routines and duties. Sixth house is a house of routine, daily routines. And we know that Laci was out walking her dog that day, and she was abducted. The dog's moving around the neighborhood and then put back into the backyard. Now, the sun is also in the sixth house. Sixth house is also the house of stalkers. So the sun is oftentimes seen as a perpetrator. So quite possibly somebody was stalking Laci. We don't know who at this point. Down below, we have Pluto. Pluto is at 18 degrees. I'm not going to talk too much about degrees, but this one I like to point out. 18 degrees is the evil degree. So it's an evil person, an evil act, or so on like that. And that's the problem in the chart. So I think it's highlighting that daily routine that Laci was doing, and then some evil person interacted with her to a certain degree. Moving down into the chart, we have Venus. And Venus is in Scorpio, and that is a romantic attachment. But because it's in Scorpio, it's also something that's hidden. Anything having to do with Scorpio is a hidden factor, a secret romantic involvement. So again, that highlights Amber Fry and Scott Peterson's relationship. Down below that, we have Mars. Mars is usually anger or aggression in there, but there's something passionate about it, being that it's right next to Venus or conjunct with Venus, and that could be a conflict or violence in there as well. We don't know really what that is. Now we move to the moon. This can be seen as Laci. It's a secondary indicator or significanter to Laci, and it's in the third house. Third house is the neighborhood, so that's highlighting her in that neighborhood. It's also short journeys, so she was taken away, and where she was taken away, by van or by boat, it's up, I guess, to the course to decide that. Also, it's the emotional focus on the case. So we saw that the family was heavily involved and the emotions were high and so on. But so that's just highlighting that. Let's move on to Jupiter, which is in the second house. This is aggressions of value and possessions. Second house is possessions. So I don't know what that's really highlighting, but quite possibly that could come out in a court case later with the Innocence Project.
Say that one more time. Aggression of...
It's aggression of values and possessions.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you have, there's a relationship, and it's nice that we highlight this cross relationship to the houses. So if you see money matters going on in the eighth house, you always look to the second house. And there's sometimes a money matter there, and you can kind of put two and two together. So I think there's something up financially there,
Mm-hmm.
possibly also with a reputation as well. Then we move up to Saturn. Saturn is in Gemini, the twins. And with there, that's confinement and isolation. So I think that has to do with Laci possibly being either, well, it was taken by Scott Peterson. He took 3 large umbrellas with him, which is unusual. Who keeps 3 umbrellas at the house or in a truck or wherever? And also in the boat, it could be confinement, possibly in the water. Not too sure on that. But here is my theory. The 12th house, that is also your hidden enemies. The information that came out of the case was that 2 burglars, this alternate theory, 2 burglars had robbed a house in the neighborhood, and then it was thought that they kidnapped Laci. I'm not saying that that's true because the chart often has more than one outcome to it, but the possibility exists here. So what we see here is Gemini, which is 2 of, right? The twins, it's a double-bodied sign. Whenever you see a double-bodied sign, especially in the 12th house or the 7th house, you pay attention to that because there's often 2 people. And with this, it also has Saturn in here. So an older person. We know that one of the burglars was an older person, right? So that lends to a burglar being involved. We go across to the 7th house, which is your open enemy. And what we have here is Mercury. Mercury, again, because it's the ruling planet of Gemini, that's also 2 of. So again, it just heightens the fact that there were 2 people, 2 burglars in there, and you have a 22 degree, that's a kill or be killed. I'd like to highlight as well. So they're probably going to be doing something. Maybe Laci came by and they said, oh, she saw us. If we don't take her and do something with her, we're going to get into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get found out. We're going to have to kill her. So I say that the possibility does exist.
Yeah, I think for me too, when I tried to psychically do this case and intuitively do it, I felt that the burglars were a much bigger part. And I also felt because of what you've unveiled, John, with all the deception and all of this mystery and everything, I think, and the relationship part, that I think that Peterson, Scott Peterson, had arranged to have Laci killed, possibly, and it never went through on the boat. That possibly the burglars, he paid off the burglars or someone to get her to the boat. It never happened, and something went awry, and then the burglars ended up killing her. So I think that Scott Peterson, had the intention of hiring people and went through with it, but it didn't go according to plan because these people weren't, hardcore mobsters that do this all the time. They basically messed it up. So I think there is an element in there, especially because if you hear the case, Scott Peterson is constantly saying, oh, I was going fishing. No, I was going golfing. I was going fishing. I was going golf. I mean, he kept changing the story, and it was crazy. And I really can't get past that part. I also can't get past the part where he had he bought these fishing rods that weren't for, I think he was fishing in the sea and they were for freshwater and none of the rods were open and all of these things. And it just didn't make sense. So I think he did have the intention to do it. I think he paid people to do it and something got screwed up.
And that could be the financial aspect of the chart that we're looking at. But definitely, I agree with you on the psychic information as well. I feel the same way as you do, right along those lines. Plus, there were the holes in his story where he's saying he's golfing, and he's saying it to some people. No, he's fishing. Nobody knew he had. You're right about the rods. He also had a lure, the silver lure that he told people that he used. It was still in the package.
Right.
And then he kept all the receipts. I don't know about you, but parking receipts, I throw them out right away. I'm not keeping them. I think he was doing that very methodically. It's when you're in deception, you really can't keep things straight. And it's like when you tell a story, you could tell a lie, but then try and tell it backwards. I don't know if anybody's ever done that. Like, hey, Scott, give us the case backwards. Start off, from the end, work your way to the beginning, and oftentimes it can't be done.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. So I think a lot of these things that you say in the chart come together in that theory.
Exactly.
Because I don't think, and Scott Peterson, he's just, he came across and he still comes across as so cold and unemotional. Part of me can't get over that as well. Now, right. I don't think, and I told you this, John, in the beginning, that I don't think just because he had this long-standing affair makes him a murderer, which I think back in 2002, 2004, people subscribed to that. Oh, you cheat on your wife, you're automatically now a horrible person and you're a murderer and all of that. Now in 2024, we have a lot more information on everything, right? Especially the psychological background on so many things. So I never subscribed to that, but there is something in the way of his personality and how it's so stoic and he has no reaction to anything. And especially at the time, there was no emotion. It is weird.
Right. Well, it was funny. On my way out to the Cape, I was listening to a program on NPR, and they were interviewing a man.
That's Cape Cod for international listeners, guys.
And his name was James Pennebaker. And I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And he has a book called The Secret Life of Pronouns. And he is sometimes tapped by law enforcement agencies to look into cases, or sometimes lawyers will have him look at some of the statements that are being made by either their clients or the other side. And what he came out with in his studies is that there's I statements and then there's me statements. And they focus kind of on two different things. So in the beginning, Scott Peterson was saying, I this, I, but then it kind of turned and he went to me, and it kind of takes the focus off of Laci Peterson. What's interesting to me is he's now going back to the I statements again. So I don't know where he's going with that.
It's definitely tricky. It's definitely, he's a strange guy. Yes, he's extremely detached, disassociated. I think you know this, John, but Gone Girl, that fictional book and movie, was based on this. And Ben Affleck plays it actually really well. Plays him very well. It's not supposed to be him, but he's very unattached, and that's kind of, I don't know, I can't get over that. So I think there really is something with that burglary. I think he was trying to pay for her murder. It all got messed up, and I'm going with that. So do you have anything else, John, to add from the chart?
No, this is just, I think that the two burglars, we see them here, and that's a different part of the story that wasn't talked about before. Basically, astrologers just looked at the charts and saying, oh yeah, here's Scott and Laci, here's what happened. But now with the burglars, I see them in the chart and I see them with an accurate chart. And all I'm saying is the possibility exists.
Thank you. Yes, allegedly, and the possibility is what we're saying to make sure we're legally covered. Now, what do you think will happen with the Innocence Project? Do you think they will be successful exonerating Peterson?
I don't think they would have taken on the case unless they thought they could win. So yes, I think they have something right now. They're holding that close, and they'll come out with it during trial. But yeah, I'm pretty confident in the Innocence Project.
Me too. And it's really interesting talking about astrology. I'm not very into astrology, but the one thing I do know, and I've talked about many times on this podcast, is that we're going deeper into the age of Aquarius, right? So that means that a lot of the things are being exposed that should be exposed.
Exactly.
So you have things like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, all of these things, the Harvey Weinsteins, the Jeffrey Epsteins, the P. Diddy. He's a good example of that. Everything's being exposed, even the Menendez brothers. They may be looking at a new trial because their second trial it was a joke. I mean, if you watch the series, it was an absolute joke. So I think that he will get a second chance out of prison. I really do, because they have 1,000 pages of court documents, number one. Number two, they have a lot of DNA, and they refuse to test the DNA in the van, which is ridiculous. Wrap things up pretty quickly with this case. And they wanted Scott Peterson to be burned at the stake in a way, you know what I mean? And so because of that, they feel that there was a lot of corruption in the Modesto police. They felt like they were being pushed along. Come on, just wrap up the case, allegedly. Let's nail this guy. The media was all over Peterson. Peterson looked horrible in the media with the affair with Amber Fry. And then he had no emotion. So I think a lot of corruption was also happening there. Allegedly.
I agree with you as well. There's a lot of pressure on the police, not just from the public, but also higher up, mayor's office and something. They just want a quick closure, an ending, a conviction, and then move on. And there's a lot of resources attached to it too. Scott Peterson, he's definitely not a poster boy for innocence, right? He is very detached, and you know what? I kind of understand that in a way that I was an X-ray tech in a trauma center. You have to have a certain level of detachment, but it doesn't mean you're dispassionate,
Mm-hmm.
But he's just horrible at displaying himself as someone who didn't do this and who's innocent and who loves his wife and who's missing her and his unborn son.
And his baby. That's what I can't get over as well. This is his son. And he had no emotion over the son as well. That's what I found a little... I mean, I don't know if there's just more we don't know. There could be a lot more on the Laci side as well that I think we don't know. This is very alleged. I don't want to upset anyone, but we don't have... that I know of, maybe we do, John, but do they have the paternity of Laci's son? Can you get that afterwards? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I believe that through the medical examiner and the autopsy, I believe that something could be done. It was a long time before she was found.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how the water works on a body at that level, that far internally. But they could tell, she was pregnant.
You just don't know. No one ever questioned the paternity of,
Right.
And I'm not trying to say anything bad about her at all, but we don't know. We don't have all the evidence. We don't know if maybe we know he was having an affair, but we don't know what she was doing either. And listen, this woman was murdered and I feel horrible for the family and horrible for her, but a person is a person and has many sides to her. And the media wants to take one side and portray this person as complete, innocent. I wouldn't say virginal because she was pregnant, but that perfect kind of mother and wife and portray it that way, but we don't know.
You know, it's so funny that you say this, and I run into this in cases. Somebody
I
will
bet you
bring
do.
up, yeah, somebody will bring up something, and I was like, yeah, you know, I kind of saw that in the chart, but I'm moving away from that. I'll leave that to the side. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, in the chart, there are things in there about problems with the relationship, and there was some anger and egos, financial things. So, yeah, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. So I really don't know, but there is something to that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. So, John, it was so lovely having you back. Thank you so much. This was so fun to do.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It is fun.
It's so fun. So, I'm glad that we just figured out everything for the Innocence Project. You can write us a check, make sure it's a lot of money. We'll split it
Sounds good.
and we're good. So, John, is there anything that you would like to promote? Your website or
Well, yeah, I do have a website, the Perceptive Investigator, www.theperceptiveinvestigator.com. Anybody who wants to find out about forensic astrology or reach me if they have a case and want me to look into it, they can find everything on there. I also have some resources, some books and things like that. Not my books, but
one day?
yeah, one day. But you know where they can read about it and learn it. And you know what? You don't have to know astrology to do forensic astrology. That's the great thing about it.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So John is amazing. And I said this in our last episode with him that Tony Stockwell, who's, the creme de la creme, people know him more in the UK, but he's kind of our James Von Pra over in the UK. And he said in the course I took that John is getting too good at this. He's surpassed Tony. So yeah, if you guys have a case and you want to run it by John, definitely contact him at that website. If you're driving or something and you're like, oh, darn, I didn't get the website, you can always go back, look in the show notes. I'll put it there. Or you can just DM me or email me. I'll give you all the information. So, John, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
And we always end by having the guests say the catchphrase. So I will say it first and then I will prompt you and you will say it. I always say, until next time, live your life 2 inches off the ground. Until next time,
Live your life 2 inches off the ground.
thanks, John.
Thank you.